the willpower of showing up with discipline is not enough because when those synchronistic things occurred, willpower doesn't matter.
Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to another episode of About Her. Today I have the wonderful Kim Charlson with me. Kim, thank you so much for coming on. I am super excited to have you here, to have you and your perspective, and also, as you offered, to have you channeling. And I think this will be quite special. So thank you so much for coming on. Big welcome. And for starters, if you like, I would love to have you introduce yourself because you can do it best.
Well, thank you first off for having me. It's a delight to be here to be able to share this perspective that I have garnered through some challenging moments and to kind of give the listeners a little bit about me. I am a voice channeler, which means that I surrender my physical form and move my consciousness out of the way to allow a spirit being named Monty to come through and speak through me. And together we offer channeled guidance that's really practical and grounded and very centered on allowing yourself to come more into being that expression of your soul and living more in alignment in a very practical, actionable way, which is kind of the thing that separates our work from a lot of other channelers.
I can imagine. And I love that you two found a way to kind of make it really grounded and practical because that is something that I sometimes, not that I miss, but I think that is so helpful, especially for people who might have not dive deep into channeling or connected to their own intuition. And then some language is quite hard to understand if you haven't. So I love that there's practical advice that is just so helpful. So what have you decided to speak about today? Because there are a gazillion of topics I'm sure that we could speak about is willpower and how we more slowly or maybe not so slow came to the conclusion that that's kind of not the path to go on in our lives and also in how we find connection to ourselves, how we shift our lives into being more on purpose or being more authentic or just being more fun, depending on the standpoint of each and every one of us and the listeners. So I would love to start with asking you, what was the point in your life where you felt this okay, that's just not working, the forcing through, the pushing through, it's just I'm kind of like running through a wall, that kind of moment? Did you have that, and where did it came up so clear that you couldn't go on anymore?
Yes, I definitely did. So when I was in my young 20s, I founded a marketing agency that really just started with me and a computer in a spare bedroom in an apartment. And eventually grew it to the point where we had 7 employees and it was making over 7 figures a year and it was really successful. But things were just randomly going wrong all the time. And it was stuff that couldn't be helped. Like it wasn't a management issue that I could manage my employees more or create better systems. It would be really just synchronistic things that would just fall apart and would cost the business a lot of money, create a lot of heartache for me, of a lot of stress and a lot of sleepless nights. And I got to the point where I was just like, I can't keep doing this. The willpower of showing up with discipline is not enough because when those synchronistic things occur that are good or bad, that are in our lives, willpower doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much we may want to do something. Sometimes the universe has an entirely different plan for us. And these events kept happening in little ways. So it'd be things like we would be doing Facebook ads and the system would glitch and spend an entire client's budget in a single day instead of over a month. And it would be like nothing we could help. And then we'd be like, okay, Facebook, what's the deal? And they'd be like, sorry, our bad. And then there was no solution. And it was things like that would happen, that it wasn't any mistake of like my employees. It wasn't any mistake of like we could have had better systems to check it to make sure it wasn't going to do that. It was just system glitches. And things like that kept happening over and over to the point that I started to have a lot of anxiety constantly of like, when was the next shoe going to drop? And had always like built this entire marketing agency based off of willpower. I had gotten to the point where I had employees. I was still working like 80, 90-hour weeks and working way too much and was constantly in this mindset of if I can just crack this nut, it's going to get easier. Things will
Mm.
shift if I can just figure out this one piece that must be missing, or identify this one strategy, or figure out how to make myself do something differently. That it was constantly this willpower of optimization coming up over and over and over. And it got to the point where things just really got bad. My husband also dislocated his shoulder around the same time. So he had worked with me in the agency that we owned it together. And he was unable to even function. Like, couldn't dress himself, couldn't shower, couldn't do anything while he was waiting for an operation, and then had to be cared for as part of that because he couldn't move his shoulder for months. And as I would be driving to the office, I'd just be white knuckling the steering wheel
Mhm.
because it was also in the time period where things had started to open back up in the pandemic. And people were really angry and they were driving like crazy. And so the anxiety combined with that of just trying to get to the office,
Mm.
that the office was associated with where my willpower was failing, created just this energy within me that was overwhelming and I didn't know how to deal with it. And really came into the point of, okay, well, I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to try to use like stoicism, which is you can't go over or around the obstacles. You have to go through them using your willpower. It's a very masculine, energy focused way of viewing the world, which makes sense. It's from, Roman emperors where willpower was the basis of survival. And about just willing myself over these emotions, which is a lot of what I found in therapy as well, was even traditional CBT, which works for lots of people. But if you're very self aware and have a lot of willpower, it does not help you
Yeah.
process through those emotions. It doesn't answer those problems. So it would be like I was aware, okay, why am I feeling this way? This is what's happened. Is that a rational thing? No, but I still feel that way. Okay, what do I do about it? There was no amount of willpower that was going to get me through it. So at that point, I turned towards energy healing because therapy hadn't really worked. Doing more of the conventional modalities hadn't worked. I didn't have a lot of awareness at that point in time of all the things that were out there. But a close friend of mine had started doing energy healing and said, "Hey, I'm giving away free sessions. Why don't you come try?" And that's when things started to shift for me, where it was like, okay, maybe willpower isn't the thing that's going to get me through this. Maybe it's learning to relax and come to a point of acceptance of these things and seeing them as a redirection of what actually needs to be happening in my life. Because through all of that, living in that very willpower perspective of like, I got up at 5 a.m. I answered my emails first thing in the morning. I went into work, full face of makeup, 4-inch heels, wearing a power dress, like very fit that mold of a very corporate woman, showing up with very serious clients, holding my own, and constantly fitting myself into this container because that's what willpower really is. It's asking us to shove our energy into a container that we don't belong in, and eventually figured out, hey, I'm not even supposed to be in this container anyway. The things that are really aligned for me don't take that kind of willpower. And energy healing was the bit that kind of started to open that up for me.
Wow. I love that very much. And I think the way your life went to that time is something that is so relatable to so many people I know, including myself. Like when I think back in my first jobs or my first business, it was exactly the same thing, trying to optimize and always thinking like right around the corner, there's the solution. And it's kind of the way we have been conditioned. And it makes sense
Hmm.
through that lens. But there is so much force behind it, and most of us are not aware of it. So it's kind of like I feel like we're chasing our own tails, trying
For sure.
to get somewhere, but actually just circling. And it's so exhausting. So how wonderful that energy work finds you and that the universe kind of like in hindsight, I think it's always very clear and sometimes very humorous how the universe is like super stubborn at saying like, no, not this. And here's another glitch and here's another thing and here's something else, not to break you, but to set, to kind of make you aware that things could go different and also things could be so much easier. But
Hmm.
also it's a, it's like a huge paradigm shift to say like, oh, the solution is in relaxation when I'm working that much hours. How was it for you? How do you manage to like kind of shift let's say your nervous system, your subconscious, however you want to call, like the habitual part of you to go from go, 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 full mode to learn to relax more and to actually allow yourself to rest. I for myself can say like that's super scary sometimes still, but
Yeah.
definitely was when I started to like I'm just sitting here, I'm not doing anything valuable to add into the world at the moment. I'm just being. How did you kind of like find your way through this without
Mm.
again using willpower?
Yeah. So the first part is that I couldn't relax.
Mhm.
Of when I would try to relax, the anxiety of not being productive or the things that were about to go wrong would come up. So relaxation was not the solution for me of just saying, okay, I'm going to take time away. I'm going to figure out how to allow myself and my nervous system to reset. What it really was identifying that the goals that I had as part of this container that I'd put myself into weren't even things that I actually cared about.
Mm,
And it was that recalibration of saying, okay, so what is the point of all of this work that I'm doing? I'm making good money, but I'm not using it in any way that's really contributing to my life in a way that I'm like, okay, I see the point of this other than just the accumulation of wealth that we're supposed to want money. Okay.
yeah.
I'm good at making money. Check. Got it. Or I like, it got me the different possessions in my life that were nice. I'm not going to say I'm not thankful that those paid for those things, but they weren't the things that were really the most aligned with me, or how I would show up in client relationships were not really the way of that who I wanted to be in those. And so it was really coming to terms with that the person that I had to be to fit inside of this container of the willpower that I was using was constantly diminishing the version of myself that I really could be. That it was asking myself to really shrink down to fit into a container of this conditioned idea of what success looked like and who I had to be to get that success. And in really starting to come into that awareness of, oh, actually, I don't really care about these things that I'm striving to get. These things are not really that important to me. Like, it's not my goal. Why am I doing this in the first place? And coming into that awareness of what my priorities actually were was a thing where my willpower began to shift. Because then instead of saying, I'm really proud with how this project worked, I worked so hard on it. I used all my willpower to really produce this project and get it out the door. And being proud of that, instead it shifted into something of, I'm really proud with how I'm connected to myself and how I'm showing up, and that I'm taking the time to figure out what I want and who I want to be in a way that allows me to express who I am, to express that authenticity of myself, of what I think is the way that I should behave instead of what this container is dictating. And so then I found myself in this really sticky in between. I was still in this container of the marketing agency and showing up to that and facing all those requirements that took all that willpower to produce and saying, okay, I can't do this anymore. Now what? Like, this is my family's livelihood. It's my career. How am I going to shift my identity while still knowing that I have to stay in that container? I'm not ready to just be like, whoosh, I'm gone.
Mm,
And also, I had the responsibility to other people. Like, there were people who worked for me. So just to have like a
mhm,
massive shift in identity also would have abandoned the certain amount of responsibility that I had to other people as well. And so I said, okay, well, how am I going to do that? And at that time period, I was trying to figure out, okay, where do I want to go with my work? Like, what is actually work that's aligned for me? And I thought, energy healing has been so transformative for me to figure out that all of this was out of alignment. It's helping me come more into alignment, but I don't really yet know how. I'm kind of in that sticky in between. I think I'm going to start offering energy healing to other people and see how it goes, because I saw the power in energy healing, was like, yes, this is it. And decided, like my friend did, to offer free healing sessions, and no one took me up on them. Absolutely no one wanted one, which at this point now I realize was just a redirection from the universe, because at that point, I gave one free healing to my husband because he was the only person who was like, yeah, I'll let you try
yeah,
on me. And when I was doing that healing, I could feel this other energy off to the side that I figured wanted to come through and be channeled to him to help in his healing. And the next thing I know, it's in my throat and I started channeling and doing voice channeling. And it was all just because I decided to try to offer free healing sessions to people. Nobody wanted it. And it was in a relationship with trust. And that's how I ended up figuring out that voice channeling is actually very aligned work for me. And it is all about releasing our willpower. It is a very different type of discipline. And so I've come into a more deep understanding of willpower has its place, but in a very different form than the one that we're used to.
I feel it's a lot about like redefining these words, willpower or even discipline. And I found for myself that the moment I've redefined discipline for me, I came to actually kind of like it, but
Mm.
not the classical definition. And I think that's the thing that I hear from your speech as well, that the way you look at willpower now is something totally different to like how you would have described it at the start of your business or even in the in-betweens. And again, it's so beautiful that you have been redirected and there was this moment of like very clearly saying like, no, that again is not the path, but you're more close, definitely. Just look over here. I feel the
Mhm.
moment we
Yeah.
see these signs, it's again like a letting go of willpower and embracing more. You said at the start the masculine energy when you described the way you worked in your former business. And I think that's a big part to like actually, even as females, especially as females, to embrace our feminine qualities in business as well, not only in like the
Mhm.
private space, and actually say like, okay, let's see what comes up rather than say like, okay, I've planned all these things and now I'm checking them off. And that's exactly how it felt to me when you described like, oh, that there was something that wants to come through. It's a surrendering to
Yes.
a higher power and knowing that it is beyond what your logic could maybe have imagined in that moment. But there again, it was there presenting itself, and it took a lot of like courage and femininity to say like, let's see, who are you, what do you want to do here? And that I think is really beautiful, because then you have like the kind of the dance between the masculine and the feminine, the way I feel it should be, if we want to use any shoulds. And we have like the actual balance of the energies in there.
Yeah, and the interesting part was I was kind of already in that journey of surrender, of
Mm.
understanding before that event happened where I channeled for the first time spontaneously. I was really trying to let the universe work through me more because I didn't know the answers at that point. I had no idea where life was going to take me. I could not see a path forward because of viewing it from the container that I was in at the time. There was no path forward of like, that was that. You just learn how to manage your emotions and deal with it and get on with it was kind of that perspective that I was given. And that at best I could find tools that helped me deal with it, but just continue down that path. And doing the energy healing work, I learned like, we're just here to accept the energies that are flowing through us and to allow the healing to happen rather than to be trying to force the energies through us. It's a really different perspective. And in that moment where the channeling happened, if it hadn't been with somebody that I know really intimately who has a relationship with his spirit guides that then confirmed, like, hey, this is one of my spirit guides speaking through you, I would have been like, "Oh, that was weird," and just moved on. I wouldn't have probably said like, "Oh, I should investigate this." And so then at that point, I went down the path of really learning how to channel in a very formal setting. But one of the things that my guide Monty has talked about quite often is that the container is only there to hold the energy. So that way it can be interacted with, but that the energy is what dictates the container, not the other way around. So, very often we use willpower and discipline as the thing of the container to force the energy into the container and say, this is the container it has to go in. I'm going to use
Mhm.
my willpower to force myself to show up to do the things that have to be done to make this container happen. Versus the opposite perspective is this is the energy that I am bringing forward. This is the energy that I am, or I want to be, or how I want to present myself in the world, or even the work that I'm creating. What is the appropriate container for it? What does it look like where it allows for that energy to be what it needs to be instead of using willpower and discipline to really force it into a container where it doesn't belong. And we live our lives with so many of these containers, of these identities, basically, because the container is really a way that we can identify ourselves. We need containers to a certain extent so that way we can interact with ourselves. When we don't have those containers, we're kind of floating off in Neverland and have a really hard time functioning in the world. So there is the balance between that feminine energy that we're tapping into of that state of being, and then the masculine energy that allows that energy to be held, to be brought into physical manifestation, to be consumed and interacted with. And then even goes with our self identities. A lot of times we have a hard time like putting our finger on exactly who we are. It can be really hard, especially when we're early on in our spiritual journeys to like identify like who am I? That's a question everybody wants to know. It's such a common question that it is probably one of the most asked questions in channeling sessions with clients that I have, that they ask, okay, how does my spirit guide see me? Everybody wants to be seen so that way they can interpret themselves because they don't know themselves first off.
They don't see
And so
themselves.
it's yeah, it's those containers that really are very important. But it's taking the energy to dictate the container rather than taking the container to dictate the energy. So we can view that in every different aspect of our lives, our own identity, what containers we put ourselves in different relationships. Relationships themselves are a container. Our businesses are a container. The products and offers that we serve are containers. There's lots of different ways to view that structural element and say, okay, is the structure taking care of the energy? Is it making the energy be able to be in its state, to be interacted with and consumed in that way? And then willpower and discipline come back in of saying, okay, how can I make sure that this container is constantly holding that energy? And assessing it from that point of discipline of saying, is this the right energy in this moment? Am I disciplined in bringing that energy through of being the right vessel for it? Which is in its essence what I do when I channel. My only job when I'm channeling is to be the vessel. It is to be the container. So I am in one way being the very masculine energy of holding the space for what Monty wants to share to come through. It comes through me, but my vessel is the container through which it comes. So my work is making sure that my emotions are out of the way, that my logic's out of the way. My consciousness is not interfering, that I have a healthy body as best that I can. Even with someone with chronic illnesses, it's taking care of those, treating my vessel, my physical vessel very well to make sure that I am doing that discipline and using that kind of willpower, which sometimes also looks like today is not a day to channel. I'm going to have to reschedule with my clients and say, I'm really sorry. We're going to have to do this another day. And to have that radical honesty about when the container is not appropriate.
I feel that flows very much into wearing a mask, something that you hinted to before when you talked about like your appearance in your previous life, I'd say. And it's maybe almost like the same thing. We so often do wear masks to try to be a certain version or a certain identity and try to kind of make these containers around us by kind of like structure or something that we can hold or lean towards to say like, okay, that's me when I'm working, or that's me when I'm partying, or that's me as, I don't know, a mom, a friend, a wife, or whatever. And with all of these, as much as they're needed, I totally agree with you. They want to be questioned to see like who am I bringing there, or how much of me is actually being able to be contained in this container. How small is it? How big? So I very much love the reframe that you gave around actually not trying to fit yourself in the container, but building the container in a way that it suits you, that your life actually is for you. And it's not something that you live in a way that might meet the expectations of others or of a earlier version of you, or both, but rather be what really is yours. And then we're again at the surrender part to a big extent. So I love that there's so much possibility for us if we do take the time to kind of reconnect and become more slow and also reflect honestly about what it is that is needed or how we can connect to our purpose to actually say, let's do that, even when we use this different form of willpower to kind of redesign our life or open up our lives, it's possible. And that is very beautiful, I think, even though it might look very scary from the outside when the next steps aren't clearly visible. So that is something that if you're open to, as you said before, and maybe Monty won't come through, that is something that we can ask him to
He
see
he's
his
hanging
perspective
out,
as
so he'd be
well.
delighted.
Cool. That's
So,
amazing.
one last thing I'll share from, like, the human perspective is that I don't think we ever stop wearing our masks.
Mm,
That we always strive and say that unmasking and being the most authentic version of
mm.
yourself is the goal. But to a certain extent, the only one that can experience you fully is you, and everyone else can only experience you through their own interpretation of that energy, which is, in a way, a mask. And so there is this both and of like, we don't want to be masking. We want to be our most authentic selves, but we have to also come to terms with that with the nature of the reality that we live in, masks are just kind of inbuilt. So it's choosing more actively how we are creating those masks with intention rather than just saying, I'm going to fit what everyone wants me to fit. I am the one who is choosing that. I'm the one who's dictating what that mask is going to be and hope that the other people that I'm interacting with interpret it in that way. And if they don't, they don't, but at least that's my intention.
Love that very much. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll bring through Monty now, not bring back. I just finished a channel.
So you bring him back as well.
I'm bringing him back because I just finished a channeling session with a client right before this. So he's been hanging out this whole time. So I'll bring him in. So what I'll do is just guide everybody into a mode of receiving. So we'll breathe in 3 times and just relax and just be ready to receive his wisdom. So breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. And now I'll invite him in, and the next voice you hear will be him. Hello, this is Monty. We are delighted to be here with you to discuss willpower and discipline. So before we go on to questions that you may have for us, we would first like to offer our perspective from a non-physical standpoint. Does that sound all right?
That sounds wonderful.
Beautiful. So, from our perspective, how we view willpower is the power of your individual will. There is the divine will, the universe that is acting, orchestrating synchronicities and ways of being and ways of doing that you are eventually and constantly coming into. But there is the willpower of your individual will, that free will that you are constantly exercising, whether that is consciously or unconsciously. And so when it comes to using your willpower, it is the determination of your own self that is the goal. That when your soul came to be incarnate, it decided in many ways that it wanted to exercise its free will in manifestation in the physical world to allow itself to express its uniqueness versus divine will, the collective will, the all that is. And this is how we view willpower. Discipline, taking it from a more non-physical perspective, is rather the discipline that is involved in enacting that free will on a consistent basis of saying over and over again, am I resorting to something that is consistently me? Am I habituated to acting out my willpower, my free will, and how I want to be in the world? Or am I behaving in such a way that is reinforcing the discipline of others, of other perspectives other than mine, and therefore coming into that self abandonment? So it is the balance of your own free will and discipline as a tool, while also understanding that the collective and divine will continue to interact with you and to continue to place you in different containers that are not of your own choosing, that will allow you to interact with them to exercise your free will and willpower. Now, what is your first question?
Thank you so much. I have a lot of questions coming up. Maybe the first one that comes through is, while you spoke, I felt a very strong connection between willpower, how you define it, and our urge to create our own experience. So it equals creativity in a way, the way you describe willpower.
Yes. So, what we would take away from your statement to incorporate this idea in is first the definition of what it means to be separate from the whole. As such, your soul exists separate while also in union with all that is. But you, in your individual identity, have come to the point of being a creator, that you are a reflection of the all that is the ultimate creator. But you, in your own essence, are a version of that, a smaller creator that creates within their own energy, their own image in the same way. So we do not mean in a very, how shall we put it, traditional version of everything is created within its own image in that version that may be alluded to in religious texts, but more of the idea that the all contains everything there is, and so it exists in separation in all that it is. It is both a mirror and itself. And as well as the individual creator, what you are creating through your own willpower and self discipline is a reflection of your own energy, even if that thing is very separate from you. It is imbued with your energy, with part of who you are, that it comes through your vessel in such a way that it is your creation. It can be identified with you, but it is separate from you. And that is the key to understanding your relationship with everything that you create. It is in part you in the same way that you are also in part of everything, but it yet also is separate in the same way that you are also separate from everything else.
The way most people define willpower with a lot of force and hustle. When we strive to come out of that and connect more to the bigger picture and our souls and our purpose and essential, what would you say is a good way to remind ourselves that there is not only this forceful willpower, but there is the willpower that makes us free souls creating our lives and being reminded of the connection to the all and the reflection of the all that we are?
Yes. What is key to understand here is that you are exercising your willpower, your free will, at all times, whether or not you recognize it. Every action, decision, or indecision that you are making are an exercise in your individual choices. So, for example, if you are saying that you have been unable to relax because you need to be disciplined and have much willpower and in the hustle and movement of energies forward in your creations at all times, what we would say is that relaxation is also an exercise in your own creation. You are exercising your free will in such a way that allows you to come into the point of rest in your energy. Feeling that oneness with yourself allows you also to feel that oneness with all that is. And that is the key of why rest is productive, is that by allowing yourself to exercise your free will in the coming into a deeper union with yourself, that deeper union also allows you to come into a deeper union through your soul into the all that is, that you feel that movement of your energy inward, upwards, and outwards to connect with everything and all around you. That gets you into that state of deep connection. And that is the purpose of exercising your free will to create relaxation. Because in the moments where you are constantly creating the free will of separation, of creating new things that exist in separation, you may forget from time to time that those things are you. They are also everything, that connectedness is there because the focus is on the separation of creating something to exist in separation. So it is the dichotomy between creating and relaxing in that moment of surrender to come back into union. The best souls, in terms of their abilities to exercise their free will, can hold both of these energies at the same time, of creating from that position of union.
So it is about the becoming or the broadening of the vessel to hold both energies of the same at the same time, more than it is about choosing one or learning to direct our willpower.
Correct. Why we are offering this as a solution is because when you are creating, you are in the mode of being the same reflection of the all that is, but you, in focus on minute details and creating the separation, forget that you are assuming the act of the all that is. And so to come into the completeness of that action, of being yourself fully and completely in separation while also holding the energy of the all that is in your creative capacity, requires you to hold both of those energies at the same time, of saying, I will create the container, and inside of that container is the energy of the all that is, of my interpretation of it. And together that forms a whole that then allows that work to go out into the world in a much more, we will use the word productive, but not from the opinion of human productiveness, but eternal productiveness, contributing to the universe and to the whole at large.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We would like to give one final message for the listeners, if that is possible.
Yes, of course.
Above all, as you are listening to this, what we would wish that you take away from it is an understanding of who you are first is the most important aspect for all of your works that you create, for all of the ways that you are showing up in the world, for all of the ways that you are interacting with, or the ways that you believe that you are not interacting with the world because you are still interacting in that moment, to allow yourself to identify that beingness that you are and to emanate that out and to allow that to dictate your reality. To come into that oneness with yourself allows you to come into the oneness with the all that is, to then create and be from the most expansive perspective possible for you. We send you great love. That is all.
Mm.
Mm,
I'm back.
you had some wonderful stuff to share today.
Wow. I like words for this. That will come later. Thank you so much.
Very common experience.
Yes. Well, wow. It was very profound wisdom, and I love the perspectives of the high perspectives. It's just such a calming experience. As I said, I like the words for these. That might be something that is very worth re-listening a few times. So I'm so deeply happy that we recorded this so that you can all go through it again and again, because there's things I bet that you will understand differently every time, which makes
Mhm.
it even more beautiful.
Yeah,
Mhm.
sometimes I'll go back and listen to some of the, like, first channelings I did with Monty,
Have you
and it's
recorded them
still.
all?
Yes, I recorded them all, like, I've recorded every channeling session I've ever done, and it's really fun to go back and listen to those because our connection was not really good at that point in time, so he'll like, say the same word 3 or 4 times over, but the meaning of what he shares has evolved over time of an unfolding. It's never changed. And the energy has always been the same, even if it wasn't coming through me very strongly. But it's also always about the action that we can take. So I love that he left us with this actionable insight at the end of the most important thing for us is to identify the beingness and to come back into union with that, because then it allows us to get into the union with the all that is.
Yeah.
And from that point, then creating.
Yes. And also like what helped me a lot to have it put into the words he used is everything that we create. Yes, it's a separation, but then again, it's part of the all. So I think it's very beautiful to kind of take a look at what we do, what we have created so far from, I don't know, I'm thinking of a picture that is laying here that my son drew today, to a business that we create. But it's all creation that is kind of separate. But then again, of course, it's not. And I think it's very beautiful to kind of like relook at what we surround ourselves with through that lens. for not only gaining confidence or gaining clarity, but also the inner peace that comes with the connectedness of seeing it like both separate and as part of the all at the same time. That is very beautiful.
And it takes a while to kind of wrap your mind around it, and I think
Mhm.
that's the point
Yeah.
of, like, we'll never fully understand it, and I think that even when we're in the all, then we can't understand what it means to be in separation.
Yeah.
That is a constant rebalancing of our understanding and coming into different points of it. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't.
Mhm.
And I think that's an important part of the spiritual journey as well is there are moments where we feel so connected and so alive and they last for such a brief moment and then it's gone.
I definitely
And
know those.
we want to say that those moments are the best moments, but maybe they're all really serving us in different ways of we're not just trying to get to that like really connected state all the time, that also being our individual selves in separation is just as important. And it's
I think that
about that balancing.
that's kind of like circling back to where we started, because there's a lot of people definitely who try to like be very forceful about their out of body experiences or lucid dreaming or channeling
Yes.
or what you name it. Yeah. And it's all beautiful and it's all super exciting. I don't want to take anything away from that. But there is a lot of like force and willpower again in this, where I always wished we could go more into a balance and also an appreciation of when we're not, because we came here incarnated in these like very physical bodies. So there must be a point for this. So it's part, I think, of our purpose to enjoy this very physical experience as much
Mm.
as it's our job to transcend that and reconnect with the all. So it's again, it's like the constant dance, the constant balance of the female and the masculine, the willpower and the letting go that makes life so beautiful and makes these experiences even more profound when we've experienced the other more down to earth version before.
Mhm.
I think that makes it, like you say, the lack of wording is common after a channeling. Yes, because it's a profound experience that's not happening
Yes.
24/7. So it's kind of the point, I think, to have that. And that's very special. Thank you so much. Oh my God, there would
Very
have been like
welcome.
1,000 more questions. It's very beautiful. And I really appreciate that you came on and that you've offer to channel through. The feeling or the sensations were really beautiful, indescribably beautiful.
Mm.
So that was an extra gift next to the knowledge and wisdom that we were able to share.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. And it's been a really interesting adventure as well because I never know what he's going to say. So I always take away things from it too of this is, the containers has been something that he's been talking about a lot lately
Mhm.
of recalibrating those containers. And I think as a big population, that's where we're at right now of looking at it even from a geopolitical standpoint of the containers that we're in no longer fit, but we don't know where we're headed yet. And what we have to do is really tune in with ourselves individually and with that larger collective to figure out where we're headed. And I think it applies at all levels from us as individuals to us as a collective that
Agreed.
it's very profound wisdom.
Yeah, it calls us back to the very profound, you don't have to have it figure out everything. You just need the next step. And maybe not even that, but you just need to trust that things will evolve beautifully, which sometimes is so hard for the logical part of the human brain. That's
And
definitely
sometimes they're not so beautiful in the beginning.
so true as well. But it's something that we've all decided to be a part of here. So let's see where we're headed. Thank you very much for coming on. It was so beautiful, so enriching. I am sure the listeners will love this a lot.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.